What I'm interested in is how do we fortify and protect vulnerable areas like schools. Schools should not be soft targets. There should be, I think, an armed police officer at schools, and there should be other infrastructure there to protect them. But most people don't die from a mass shooting. They die from one-on-one shootings. And those are being done by criminals that are being released by this legislature. There's a small number of people that commit most of the violent crime. If you incarcerate those people, the violent crime rates plummet because they're not able to be in society and commit more crimes.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by Assemblyman Bill Essayli. Bill, how's it going? Thanks for joining the program.
Going good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you're newly elected from Assembly District 63. We were just kind of talking about it. It's this newly formed district in Riverside County. Kind of tell us about your district.
Yeah, so it's Western Riverside County, and it's got the cities of Norco, Corona, Lake Elsinore, Menifee, Canyon Lake, and parts of Riverside. It's sort of the old Melissa Melendez seat mixed in with part of Sabrina's old seat, Sabrina Cervantes. Okay. So it's a hybrid.
What's kind of the population of the district?
It's a lot of suburbia, a lot of, I would say, middle class people, and people with families, homes, and they have kids.
Right. A lot of people commuting.
A lot of commuters, they're going to LA and Orange County for work and sitting on the 91 freeway.
Definitely. So what were you doing before you ran for the seat here?
So my immediate prior profession was as a prosecutor. I worked both as a deputy DA in Riverside and then at the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor. And I stepped down in 2018 to run for Assembly the first time.
Okay, so this is your second time running.
This is my second time running and first time elected.
Okay, so how did the first election go? You know, what did you learn from there that kind of brought you to the
It was a very different race. The first time I ran was at a target seat, target race against Sabrina Cervantes, and it was a pretty purple district. So it had always been a Republican seat. Right. It flipped blue, and then we were trying to flip it back. It was 2018 midterm, so it was the Trump primary, so that was a complicating factor. But we did really well, but it was a tough target seat. I think what the message was that year is that national politics kind of overshadowed sort of the state and local issues of the time.
So interesting. So, you had your taste of an election, and then you were crazy enough to come back for more, kind of.
Well, I wasn't really planning on it. It was once it was redistricted, it became a safe, quote unquote, safe Republican seat, and then I was approached about running again, and so it was kind of a last minute decision.
So you're kind of saying you were working in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then you kind of stepped down to run. Is that correct?
Yeah, so under federal law, you can't run for partisan office as a federal employee. It's called the Hatch Act. So you have to resign in order to run.
Interesting. And so for 2018, you step down, you lose, then what do you do?
So I actually opened my own law firm. So I do have a law office in Irvine. We do estate planning. It's called Essayli & Brown. And I'm a business owner now.
Okay.
So, and I still have it.
Nice. So for the past 4 years, you've just been kind of doing your own thing.
Has it been 4 years? I guess, 2019. Well, 2019, 2021, and then you had COVID.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome.
We've been running the firm and dealing with the pandemic.
Okay. So doing a lot of kind of like personal family trust things and like that?
Yeah. So we do a little bit of litigation, but the primary scope is estate planning, probate, trust litigation. We go to court a lot on different issues. So I like to be in court.
Yeah. You like to be in court. You like to be in committee, right?
Well, I don't know, or it's a duty.
Man, what draw you to go to law school? Kind of, where'd you go to college and decide to go to law school?
Yeah, so I was first generation. So my parents came from Lebanon and they didn't go to college. So it was just sort of a expectation that we would go to college because we had the opportunity. We're here in the U.S. And so it was always like, you're going to go to college. Just wasn't sure what for. In high school, I was really drawn to law enforcement, and I was like a volunteer explorer with the Corona Police Department, and I became really interested in becoming a police officer. I would say my trajectory changed when I was about 16 and I was at a bank robbery, witnessed a bank robbery.
wow.
I was present for it. And I became like the main witness in the case. And so that's when I learned what a federal prosecutor was and how, the FBI works with the prosecutors and basically everything that happens after arrest in the court system. And I became really interested in that. And that's what inspired me to want to be a prosecutor. So I went to college at Cal Poly Pomona and then law school at Chapman University.
So you always stayed kind of close to home.
Yeah, Southern California. It's not a bad place.
Right. No, definitely not. Definitely not. So then you graduate law school. We were just kind of talking off camera. You graduated, 2010?
2010.
As I recall, because I graduated from law school exact same time. It was a horrible economy to get a job. So kind of how'd you get your foot to the DA's office there in Riverside County and start working there?
So I was lucky in that I had, actually before I was at the DA's office, I worked in big law. So I had summered before graduation at Paul Hastings. I was in their employment section. And they gave me an offer to join them after law school. So I was one of the few that had an offer.
You had a gig set
and
up,
I had a gig. I think they deferred us by 3 months. That was when they started deferring people.
Right.
Like normally you would start September or something. And like, oh, we're not going to start you till January. And they gave us a little stipend. But I was fortunate to have a job and kept the job during the slowdown. So I was there for about 2 years before I left to be a DA.
2 years, and then you decided to kind of, I guess, reassess your priorities.
Well, honestly, I never really wanted to go into big law, but it's if you know anything about the practice of law, which you do, but people might not know, it's a very snooty profession and industry.
Yep.
So like if you want to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office, they want you to have big law experience because it's seen as like, well, that's what good law students do. They go to big law or they go clerk. So I never really went there to want to work in big law. It was something I knew I had to do in order to have opportunities in the future.
Right.
I always wanted to be a trial lawyer. So I went in, I did the 2 years, and I had a professor who told me, he's like, just do it. You'll make a lot of money. It's good for you. It's good for the school. And then after 2 years, you could do whatever you want. And that's what I did.
You'll never see daylight. You'll work.
Yes, big law. I mean, that could be a whole other podcast, but
definitely.
it was a good experience to have that skill set.
So your hope was always to be a U.S. attorney. That was your dream.
I did, yeah. So, I mean, after being a witness in that bank robbery and watching that, and then I also externed during law school at the U.S. Attorney's Office, that was my goal.
Right. So you do your stint then at the DA's office, and finally you get your opportunity at the U.S. Attorney's office. Kind of what was it like working at the U.S. Attorney, and kind of what made you think like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be an assemblyman.
U.S. Attorney is honestly the best job I ever had. Still is. And I think most people who worked at the U.S. Attorney's office would tell you the same thing. It is truly special to be able to stand up in court and say that you represent the United States of America in court. You are the representative of the country.
You get like a little badge, don't you?
No, not what you think. No. You get like that ID card. But you don't get a badge, but you are the official representative. And I was in the criminal division, so we did criminal cases. And you get to work with a spectrum of agencies and agents from FBI, ATF, IRS, U.S. Postal Inspectors, you name it. And I was in the Riverside office, which was very small. We had about 7 attorneys who covered all of San Bernardino and Riverside County.
Right, which is a huge area.
A huge, massive area.
Right.
So
bigger than some states.
The agents kind of shop the cases with you and say, hey, got a good case. And as the U.S. attorney, you kind of had say over which cases to take or not take. So you could really focus on areas you were interested in. I got to work on so many great cases, whether it was drug trafficking cases that involved the cartel or going after doctors who were overprescribing opioids and killing people. We did a lot of fraud cases, investment fraud, took a lot of guns off the street from people who shouldn't have had them, prohibited possessors or people selling guns to people that shouldn't have guns. So it was a variety of cases. One of the coolest cases I did was there was a helicopter that was smuggling illegal immigrants, and we were able to catch them and prosecute them. But it was very unique to see that there were people actually using helicopters to move people around. It was like very sophisticated. So that was an interesting case. So yeah, it was a very exciting. You get to work on great cases with great agents. You're in court all the time, trials. The reason I left is because I was watching what was happening to the state of California. And over the last decade now, this failed criminal justice reforms where they have watered down the penalties and accountability for people committing crimes, really, to me, degrading the rule of law and what it means to have a civilized society. And I could see the morale with my colleagues at the DA's office and police officers. They basically weren't able to do their job anymore. Right. And the source of the problem was the legislature. They were passing these really terrible, quote unquote, reforms. And they're not prosecutors. A lot of them are in law enforcement. It's just their opinion. And it opened the floodgates. And now you can see the effects of whether it's quality of life crimes or drug crimes or violent crimes. They're all up across the board, and the quality of life in California is down. So I felt an obligation to step down and run for office, to be here at the Capitol.
Yeah. There's kind of a sense that like politics kind of dictates the work you would be able to do at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we're seeing that kind of with DAs as well. If DAs want to prosecute the case or not, kind of leads to what the cops arrest people for. Did you get a sense like you got to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I guess, under two different paradigms? What did politics change, your job at all, or the scope of your work, or what you were able to prosecute?
So I would say that DC, justice or Maine justice is very different from the local U.S. Attorney's Office. I will tell you at the local level, it tends to be very apolitical. We have charging guidelines and we apply them equally, irrespective of politics. And I think you see less politicized cases coming out of the local U.S. Attorney's offices. What's been politicized is Maine justice and the cases you see being filed in D.C. and how the FBI in D.C. is dictating cases. So Maine justice, in my opinion, has been politicized. Luckily, I think a lot of your line prosecutors and U.S. attorneys, they try to keep it as non-political as possible.
Okay. So like you never saw a shift or anything. Like I remember like when Trump took over, there was like this big feeling of, the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to totally change and how they prosecute things. But you didn't sense that.
No, because that's not the culture of the local U.S. Attorney's offices. But I do think that under Trump, it was the opposite. It was you saw a lot of people inside DOJ felt like it was okay to bring cases they normally wouldn't bring or pursue investigations they normally wouldn't pursue because it was Trump and that he needed to be taken out. And that is really dangerous. And I think the Durham report just revealed the double standard that was used by FBI and Maine Justice to go after the frivolous Russia claims while insulating Hillary and her party from any scrutiny.
Interesting. So now you're here in Sacramento. How's your first few months been here?
Interesting. I would say that what I'm learning the most is how bills get made here and sort of this assembly line and these deadlines. And I think there's way too many bills, and they're given very little consideration. And my impression is that this is not a healthy way to govern.
So you're like a total outsider. You didn't know anything about the process. You just showed up in December, got sworn in, and just kind of hit the ground running.
Running, and I think we introduced almost 3,000 bills.
How many did you have introduced yourself?
Well, we have so many spot bills that aren't really substantive. I would say we probably did about 10 substantive bills here, give or take.
Okay. And so kind of how are your bills going? What was the focus of your bill package, the 10?
I had a variety of bills.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Not good. Most of them are not alive anymore. I had bills dealing with animals and animal shelters at Bowies Law.
Yes.
That was held in suspense. I had bills dealing with parental rights. That was not heard in committee. I had bills dealing with firearms and reimposing the firearm enhancement for those who use a gun to commit a violent crime. That was killed in the Public Safety Committee or Unsafety Committee, whatever you want to call it. I had another bill that would have added some teeth to domestic violence restraining orders that was also killed in the Public Safety Committee. So I had a variety of bills dealing with public safety and and other issues as well. But public safety is my background, and that's sort of my focus area.
Your passion. And I guess what committees are you sitting on?
So I'm vice chair of Judiciary and Insurance. I sit on elections and privacy, and I'm also on budget and rules.
Okay.
So 6.
So yeah, good assignments there. So kind of, I just remember seeing like social media. I think you had an early public safety bill, and you were denied reconsideration.
Yeah,
which is rare. So
I hear that. It was my first bill, so I don't know what's normal. What is it?
So can you it's kind of like you're learning on the ropes, the school of hard knocks. You're coming in hot, and I guess they're kind of trying to teach you a bit of a lesson. Kind of what kind of you learned kind of so far, kind of going through these early committees and kind of going through the.
Well, I learned that the majority party is very sensitive and petty, and that if you don't. If you say something that doesn't fit their narrative or upsets them, they're willing to retaliate, and that's what Mia Bonta did. She, this is a firearm enhancement bill. It's to go after people who use guns to hurt other people, and she didn't like the fact that I cited statistics from Oakland that the majority of the victims of these crimes are minorities, black and brown people in her neighborhood that are being victimized and killed at the hands of these gun defendants, and she's not interested in locking them up, and I am. And they're so focused on the prisoner side and that what the racial composition is of the people being charged, but I'm more focused on the victims and who those people are. So she got really upset that I pointed out those facts and what was happening in Oakland. And really, it wasn't even about her in Oakland. It was I was quoting a San Francisco Chronicle article, but she was so upset. And she denied reconsideration. But she wasn't alone. I mean, her Democrats backed her up.
Right.
So. That it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not like they would have approved it on reconsideration, but it's just a little window into how sensitive they are, and all it did was elevate the bill because they got media coverage for being denied reconsideration.
Right, that's all I saw on Twitter. It was like Essayli denied. Like,
so I think something the majority should keep in mind is that the more they lash out or try to penalize us, I think it just elevates our message.
Yeah. And then the other one is this Bowies Law. You're getting a lot of attention on this. What is Bowies Law? It kind of seemed like it got kind of misunderstood or kind of backlash.
Well, I don't think there's any misunderstanding. Yeah. So Bowie was a 3-month-old puppy in the LA County shelter. There was a rescue that wanted to adopt him, and they reached out. And by the time someone at the county read the email or read the request, they already killed him. And the county said it was a mistake, it was oversight. And so talking to the rescue groups, I said there should be a basic standard where before they euthanize a adoptable pet, that they at least give 72 hours notice to the public and rescues. Very simple. Just put them on your website, say this dog is in danger of being euthanized, and give at least 72 hours notice so people can adopt or foster, which is supposed to be the goal.
Right.
And the shelters resisted this from the very beginning. Every shelter in the state opposed it because they don't want oversight and they don't want transparency. So there's a lot of gaslighting about what the bill does or doesn't do. But the bill passed unanimously through B&P committee, and then it was held in suspense.
And was there like a cost to it, or?
There was a cost because it also asked for a study, to do a state study on how we can help the shelters and get to a no-kill, become a no-kill state. So it was a couple $100,000, but we offered to take the study out to bring the cost down. So it wasn't, I don't think that's the reason.
Right.
So it was held in suspense for whatever reason, but as people know, nothing's ever dead. So we have a plan to bring it back this session, and it's coming back.
Yeah. Bowies Law.
Bowies Law. You know what? They killed Bowie in secret, and they tried to kill his bill in secret, and not going to happen.
Yeah, you're not going to let it happen. So kind of, we've seen a lot about gun control, gun safety, a lot of mass shootings. Obviously, the San Bernardino shooting, 4 or 5 years ago was a big thing here in California. You obviously were in the U.S. Attorney's Office when that happened. Is that right?
Yes, I was in the Riverside office when it happened.
So kind of what is your experience and kind of your boots on the ground experience kind of seeing and kind of what you're seeing here in the legislature? How can we marry, the gun control and, actually stopping these mass shootings?
Yeah, I mean, obviously terrorist acts are different than like the some of the shootings that are happening, which seem to be by some disturbed people. The terrorist thing is a very intentional and premeditated act. What I think we're seeing a lot is people in society who are mentally unstable, and then they're committing acts of violence either for attention or to get back at people or whatever sick thing is going on in their head. It's a very difficult issue. And I do think we all agree that there needs to be safeguards in place for people who are mentally ill or are prohibited from having guns to make sure they don't have them. But I don't think you're ever going to be in a place where we will ever have 100% no gun violence. It's a part of the society we live in. What I'm interested in is how do we fortify and protect vulnerable areas like schools. Schools should not be soft targets. There should be, I think, an armed police officer at schools, and there should be other infrastructure there to protect them. But most people don't die from a mass shooting. They die from one-on-one shootings. And those are being done by criminals that are being released by this legislature. There's a small number of people that commit most of the violent crime. It's a very small number of people. If you incarcerate those people, the violent crime rates plummet because they're not able to be in society and commit more crimes. So if you really care about gun violence, that's why I mentioned 2/3 of the victims of gun violence are minorities, you would go after the people committing gun violence. So, but I know they like to focus on mass shootings because it drives their agenda, which is gun control. I mean, the party, let's be honest, the Democrats, if they could, they'd get rid of the Second Amendment, but that's not going anywhere. So I actually want to focus on how do we make it better. And I think the way you make it better is you prosecute people who shouldn't have guns. You have the APPS program where the Attorney General has a list of people that are prohibited from having guns, but I think they have a backlog of over 20,000 cases there. That's the number one focus. Let's get guns out of the people that shouldn't have them. And then we can, I think, fortify soft targets. So that way it's not easy to just walk on a school and shoot people.
Right. Kind of, I guess, how do you balance the issue of, being, tough on crime, putting people in jail who do violent crimes, and also having kind of this issue of mass incarceration,
I don't know what mass incarceration is. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, 10 years ago, we had the largest prison population in the world.
Well, we also have the largest state. We also have a population we have more people than any other state. We had about 180,000 people in prison out of 38 million. So I don't look at mass incarceration. I look at individual cases. So every person incarcerated is there because they were either convicted of a serious crime or they pled guilty to a charge. We don't go around and round people up and throw them in mass. That's not the way it works. There's discretion exercised by the prosecutor whether to charge the case, and there's a judge that oversees it to make sure that it's fair and the law is applied equally and fairly. So this whole narrative of mass incarceration, locking people up, it's just it's cover and it's smoke for an excuse to let people out of prison. And I don't agree with it. And it's one of the biggest issues I'm going to fight up here. There is no mass incarceration. We incarcerate people who commit crimes. If someone is breaking the law or someone is being charged who's not guilty, then we should talk about that. And they should not be in prison. But they're not the victims. The prisoners are not the victims.
Mm-hmm. Kind of what are your thoughts on I guess, rehabilitation for prisoners, like the sentencing, lengths of sentences, things like that?
Rehabilitation should be secondary to punishment. That's my belief. If you commit a crime, you rape someone, you stab someone, you kill someone, first and foremost, you need to go to prison and keep the rest of society safe. Period. End of story. If then you can be rehabilitated, by all means do it. Do it while you're in prison. But they want to take punishment out of the equation and just do rehabilitation. I'm sorry to tell you, not everyone is capable of being rehabilitated. I've had 3 officers, killed in my district. I had one officer who was shot in the face during a traffic stop by someone, a third striker. That guy's not going to be rehabilitated. He's a bad person, and he needs to be locked up to keep the rest of society safe. So I think rehabilitation is secondary to punishment.
Interesting. So as you said earlier, you're on a budget sub. We're getting here into budget season. Kind of what budget sub are you on? Kind of what are the things
Sub 3. Sub 3, so it's transportation, it's natural resources, energy.
Okay, so what are some of the things you're looking at and kind of overseeing in this budget? As we got to trim $30 billion.
It's going to be more than that. So budget's interesting. Again, it's my first time up here. I'm on budget sub 3. We don't really talk much about the budget. We get presentations from the administration on different programs or whatnot, But my impression is that the chairs just make whatever budget decisions on their own. It's not really much up for debate or discussion. No, they're not. So really our role on budget is kind of oversight and ask questions on the different programs that are being presented to the legislature. That's sort of my focus there. But they have a big problem. They're going to be over $30 billion in the hole this year. They are planning to just basically cover it up with some accounting gimmicks and kick the can down the road. But according to LAO, this is not going away, and all they're going to do is create a bigger deficit for next year. So they're going to build in structural deficits for the next few years. So they either need to cut or they're just going to be out of money. I don't know what they're going to do.
Kind of what are some of the eye-opening things you're new to this, so you're hearing these presentations, you're looking at all this stuff for the first time. You're obviously an educated person, so what are some of the things that surprised you so far looking over the budget? How
unserious people are in the legislature about issues. I think it's just a lot of platitudes and good intentions, but there really isn't much discussion or debate on bills, and especially House of Origin. It's like bills are pushed through just because they're your colleague and you want to be nice to them. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very unserious process. It's a very superficial process, and it's a very rushed process by design. So we have 600 bills that we have to either approve or deny by next Friday. They're saving them all for next week, so we could all be in a pressurized room and just push the bills through so we can go home. So this is the problem. I mean, you had members upset with what Tennessee did to those members with a supermajority. We have a supermajority in California. It's not healthy. You have a party that I think is way too, they're way too powerful. I don't think any party should have that much power. And they exert their power to drive their agenda, and there really isn't much debate or opposition.
So you said you had 600 bills. How are you personally preparing to go through all those
I
bills?
I vote no unless I'm convinced there's merit or a good reason to approve a bill.
Do you personally go through all 600 and figure out what?
My staff, so we have, no, I don't personally go through all 600, but there's some bills that obviously warrant more attention than others. There's a lot of bills that really don't do much.
Right,
They're
a lot
like
of spots, things like that.
Spots, task forces, statements, things like that. Obviously, based on what we hear from our constituents or industry, there's some bills that get more attention than others. And my staff goes through them. We also have caucus staff that does analysis on every bill. A lot of them are vetted, during committee. So that's when they get a report and a recommendation. So a lot of times we look at the caucus report, we look at what our colleagues did on the committee, and then I'll look at the bill. And then my staff gives me a recommendation, and I make the ultimate decision.
Do you know how many bills you voted yes for so far?
No, I don't keep tabs. I voted for a few bills.
You did? Okay.
But we haven't voted on that many bills yet. I mean, they're saving them all for next week.
We'll see next week. We'll see what your percentage is.
Yeah, I either, if I don't know enough about it or I haven't studied it or I'm not convinced, I either just vote no or don't vote, lay off.
Right.
I make sure it's a bill if I vote yes, I do know the bill and I do read the bill and I do make sure it's something I agree with.
Kind of being a new member, have you, did you come in knowing any of the members or have any mentors among the Republican members there?
Yeah, so I having run in 2018 and now I knew some of the more senior members. So obviously James Gallagher, I know him really well, and Heath Flora and Vince Fong. So I just got to know them really well during the course of the campaign. And then there's a large freshman class. So Greg Wallace is in the neighboring district, so I know him pretty well. We got to know each other during the course of the campaign as well. And I would say the new freshman class, both Democrat and Republican, is very collegial. We did orientation together. I actually like most of them personally. Like, I may not like their politics, but a lot of them. So
you are making friends.
Yeah, you know what? I do think, when we're on the floor, it's one thing, but off the floor, I think we do try to be collegial and respectful and nice to each other. But that's okay. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And I always make a point of, I never attack the author or the person. I'll attack a bill or a policy.
Right.
But I make a concerted effort not to attack a particular person unless they attack me first.
Man, so budget season's coming up. Kind of what you're gonna have the marathon floor session. Kind of, what are you looking forward to in kind of the second half of this legislative session?
I'm looking forward to see how bad bills are going to die. I want to see how it plays out. I hear it through the House of Origin, a lot of stuff just gets through because, like I said, it's your colleagues.
Right.
And then once we're considering the other house's bills, it's not as much consideration or deference.
That second suspense file.
The second suspense file, or even in committees. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out. You have potentially a new speaker coming in, Rivas. Not potentially. I think he's done. He's going to be the new
Breaking
speaker.
news.
That's not always breaking news. We voted on it in December. So barring something unexpected, he will be the new speaker.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how he sort of leads. You're going to have new leadership and whether that's going to change up these committees or chairs or anything.
Yeah.
So
what are you hearing? Are they going to, what do you think?
They don't tell us much. They don't tell us much. No, like I've met with Robert. I actually find him to be a very personable, pleasant person. I have no idea what he's going to do. He doesn't tell me.
Tell you,
but I would hope that
Gallagher
he would
doesn't
at least Gallagher. No, we don't know. We don't know. I don't think you become speaker by like telling people everything you're going to do.
Right.
So you probably got to hold some things close to the chest. I would hope at the minimum there'll be some leadership changes in the committees,
Yeah,
particularly public safety.
Yeah.
I mean, please.
Yeah, I was like, I don't remember a year where public safety committee has been a like kind of must see TV, except for this year. It's been very interesting to watch. Today we're having
Well, they're the enemy of the public. I mean, their job is to keep the public safe, and any bill that attempts to do that, they kill it. And today they're doing the task force on fentanyl.
Yeah. Did you have any fentanyl bills or any?
I did not directly have any fentanyl bills. But I mean, it's frustrating because they don't want to do anything that will increase prison time or punishment for people selling, dealing, killing others with fentanyl.
So then how do you solve a problem? I guess without a deterrent, how do you solve the problem?
That's a great question. They're talking about it today. I don't know.
Okay,
but they want to focus on harm reduction. They want to focus on addiction. The problem with fentanyl is it's not your normal drug. This isn't something you get addicted to and then you die later.
Right.
This is like you think you're taking something you're not. You think you're taking a Percocet or an Adderall or whatever, and it's laced with fentanyl, and you will die. One pill will kill. This isn't recreational drug use.
This is not like somebody taking heroin and
overdose. No,
right.
This is you don't even know what you're taking. That's why they call it poisoning, because you're being poisoned. You're given something you don't know what's in it, and one pill can kill.
Right.
So I believe recreational drug use is over. Like back in the day where you could experiment and try drugs and maybe it was a phase or whatever, that's gone. You can't do that anymore because you really could die. So I just think it needs to be treated differently. And I think people who deal drugs should be put on notice that, hey, the drugs you're dealing could be laced with fentanyl. And if you deal it and someone dies, you're going to have an enhanced punishment.
You know, it's interesting. Like when we were kids, there was like a big push. I know, they had that Just Say No stuff. But I remember they'd come out and like they'd have commercials on TV like, don't do drugs, like you're gonna die. Like you don't see that anymore.
It was exaggerated.
There's no like public funding or public information out there to kind of.
I had the DARE program.
Right, DARE.
DARE to say no.
People going to schools like saying, "Hey kids, don't do drugs. Be careful."
I don't know why, but it's almost like it's okay to use drugs now. It's sort of the message I think that's being told to kids. Except tobacco. Tobacco, absolutely not. We have to do everything we can to keep tobacco out of the hands of kids. But marijuana, whatever.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Fentanyl, whatever.
We had a RAND researcher on, and we kind of talked about fentanyl and some of these other stuff, and the statistics on some of this stuff is small. And you talk about alcohol, which is another substance, and a lot of people die from alcohol. But again, no one wants to talk about regulating alcohol or people's use of alcohol.
Well, they tried. It's called prohibition.
Yeah, right. It's very, very interesting how we pick or choose what substances are good or bad for you. So
it's true, but I don't think it's good in general for people to use drugs. And so does that mean we go lock up everyone that uses drugs? No. But I think you work on both the supply and the demand simultaneously. The demand side is what we're talking about, the DARE. So educating people and, kids to not use drugs, lowers the demand, but also you got to deal with the supply. You cannot let this stuff get over the border, and you can't let it be ubiquitous in our community, and you cannot have basically free for all, like, okay, deal drugs and it's just gonna be a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So you have to do all.
Yeah. Well,
And harm reduction is the new thing. It's terrible. It's just, focusing on keeping people safe while they're using drugs. I don't want to help people use drugs. I want to help them get off of drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, definitely an interesting perspective,
Yes.
a fresh look here in Sacramento. Bill, thanks for taking the time to talk with us. Very interesting, and looking forward to see what you got coming up here on the second half. See if what you think comes true here. So,
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on anytime.
Definitely.